Jeremy Jędrzejkowski, welcome to Rzeczpospolita Studio at 12th National Conference, Addictions, Policy, Science, Practice. And my guest today is Peter Rice, President of the European Alcohol Policy Alliance, Eurocare, and Chair of the Institute of Alcohol Studies, UK. Hello.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming, that you found time to visit our studio. I'd like to ask about your experiences in UK and mainly in Scotland. You were one of the doctors who campaigned for evidence-based policy in Scotland, which ultimately led to the introduction of minimum unit pricing. Could you tell us what motivated your involvement?
Yes, really it started with what I and other doctors working in the field I worked in the treatment of alcohol dependence were seeing changing with our patients. I guess when I started my career in the early 1990s, about half of the patients who we saw would drink in pubs, cafes, and about half of them would drink at home. And over the years, that balance really shifted to really just seeing people who were drinking at home. We saw very few people drinking in pubs, and also the drinks that they were drinking changed. Beer and whiskey had really dominated the consumption of patients, and as time went by, that shifted to ciders and vodka. It may surprise you that Scotland actually drinks about twice as much vodka as whiskey now. And the reason for that was the cheapness of those products. So we saw that the cost of alcohol, which was falling in the stores compared to pubs, really had a big effect on the kind of drinking that our patients did. And we were seeing people who were drinking more heavily, who were sicker, and so on. So there was really quite a big change in the pattern of alcohol consumption in Scotland. That was our hunch, if you like, as doctors from the clinic. And when we got data in from the alcohol market and data from our public health agencies, that backed up what we thought was happening. So we needed a solution to those changes that were happening.
What can we learn from the implementation of minimum unit pricing in Scotland? What are the lessons learned?
Well, there's a couple of things to learn. Firstly, that introducing new legislation can be a very complicated process, and Scotland and the UK were part of the European Union at that time. So the passage in Parliament was relatively straightforward, but there were a series of legal challenges from the alcohol industry, including to the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg.
You had to comply with the European regulations.
That's right. So the legal test was, what is the public health aim of this measure? How much public health benefit is likely to happen and to which parts of the population, against the interference with free trade. So there's a proportionality judgment, a balanced judgment between those two things. But consistently it was found that the modelling and research that we'd done in preparation indicated that there would be a lot of health gain from this measure, and that was why it was ultimately found to be legal. But myself, medical training, I'd worked as a doctor all my life. I never expected to be involved with the law, but it was a very interesting process, and of course I'm very glad that we won.
And in your opinion, to what extent has the Scottish model proven to be right?
Yes, well, the best research we have was published in The Lancet, I think about 2 years ago, and that showed that compared with what would have happened without minimum unit price, there was about between a 10 and 15% drop in alcohol mortality in the first year of the measure coming in. So in a population of 5 million, that's about 150 lives. The true benefit was probably greater than that, but those are the people who very clearly were dying of alcohol harm. And we saw hospital admissions come down as well. And one very important thing is that those health benefits were in the most economically deprived parts of the population, and that was really one of the targets when we brought the measure in. We'd seen a big increase in alcohol-related harm, deaths from liver disease, for instance, through the 1990s. Most of that increase was in the people living in the most deprived circumstances. So we really wanted something that was going to improve the health of the most economically deprived and to narrow those health inequalities. And we're very pleased that minimum price did that, and that in fact all of the health benefits were in the 40% poorest people in society. Many public health interventions don't do that. If you developed a free gym membership program, if you introduced a screening program, if you introduced free bicycles, it would typically be the wealthy people who would take up those measures and actually improve their health. So many public health measures actually widen health inequalities because the poor don't take them up and the wealthy people do. So this was, I think, very satisfying to find a public health measure that narrowed health inequalities and benefited the poorest people in society.
I'd like to ask you about valuable instruments helping in this matters. What is the role of the minimum unit pricing and alcohol excise duty policy as tools for regulating the economic availability of the alcohol?
It's a very important question, and to answer it in a fairly simple way, excise duties, and I know Poland have increased excise duties, as have Lithuania and other countries in this part of Europe. Increasing alcohol taxes makes a little bit, sometimes a medium difference to every product on the market, or it should do. Minimum price makes a big difference to a smaller number of products, and it makes a bigger difference to the products that really matter in driving harm. So in that sense, minimum unit price is a more targeted measure than alcohol taxes. One issue with alcohol taxes, and we see this when we analyse the market, is that often, let's say, beer tax goes up by 10%. The low-cost beers will increase by a smaller amount than the high-cost beers. The industry will put the tax increase onto the products that are already more expensive in order to keep the cheap products, which they know are very price sensitive, as cheap as they can. So you don't have a guarantee that an excise duty increase will get through to the products that really matter, because the industry has some flexibility to apply that price increase in whichever way they think best. Minimum unit price isn't like that. It simply becomes against the law to sell alcohol too cheaply. As it happened, there were no firms broke the law when it came in Scotland. It was very well observed, and there have been no court cases at all. So that's the difference. The main difference is that minimum unit price has a guaranteed effect on the products that really matter, whereas alcohol tax increases, which are very important, they're well worth doing, they bring in money to governments, don't have such a targeted effect. But in fact, the two mechanisms work together, and the ideal would be to do both.
I'd like to ask you about one more thing, that is share observation on excise duty policy versus minimum unit pricing when comparing these two instruments.
Yes. Well, I don't think it is a versus. I think the two work together. And perhaps one way that governments could think of it is that excise duties will bring in income to governments, which of course governments need, and it also allows alcohol prices to keep up with increases in wages and so on. So there are very good reasons for governments to increase alcohol duties. But minimum unit price, I think, acts as a safety net underneath that for some particular behaviours by the alcohol industry. And I perhaps should emphasise it's not just or even mainly the producers, it's really the retailers who drive a lot of the low-cost alcohol. In Scotland, we have the same situation you have in Poland, that the alcohol is in grocery stores and part of the grocery market. It's very hard to get data on this, but we suspect that very often alcohol is actually sold at a loss in order to bring people into the store, and the store makes money on the other products which it sells. So it's a loss leader, is the phrase in English. So we need mechanisms that actually protect against that kind of behaviour by the retailers. So minimum unit price does that. So I think it is not a case of excise duties versus minimum unit price, I think the two mechanisms work together, and minimum unit price I see as being a safety net against the most risky form of alcohol, which is the cheapest alcohol, which leads to so much illness and harm in our communities.
About British and Scottish in particular experiences in limiting availability of alcohol, I was talking to Peter Rice, President of the European Alcohol Policy Alliance Eurocare and Chair of the Institute of Alcohol Studies. Thank you very much for your remarks.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure to speak to you. Thank you.